This is Criteria.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Criteria. I'm Thomas Miras, here with my co-host James Majewski. Hello, James.
Hello, Thomas.
We're just doing a quick review today of a new movie that will be in theaters on June 6th, The Ritual. It's based on the same real-life exorcism that the famous movie The Exorcist was partially based on, this exorcism which occurred in Iowa in 1928. The two main priests in the film are played by Al Pacino, who plays the main exorcist in the film, a Capuchin friar, and Dan Stevens.
Dan Stevens, yeah. People would know him as Matthew Crawley, I think was the name. He was like a major character in Downton Abbey.
And he plays the pastor of this parish and convent where the exorcism is taking place. I guess I'll say right off the bat, I don't have a lot of experience with exorcism films because I don't enjoy them because they scare the living daylights out of me. Demons are real. I believe in it. And I do not find that whole scenario entertaining to watch. I'm just like on edge the entire time, probably to like an exaggerated degree compared to anybody else who's like used to watching these kinds of films. So I rarely watch them. Unless somebody tells me, like, watch this specifically because it's, like, informative or edifying in some way. So the only two I think that I've ever watched are The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which I like, and also The Rite. Of course, this one because, it's part of my job. But you're coming from this from a different, realm of experience because you've seen a lot of these kinds of movies. And so maybe you're coming at it from a little bit of a different perspective. I imagine that it didn't quite freak you out quite as much as it did me.
Well, I mean, yes. So in my younger years, I watched a lot of horror films, many of which, I regret having watched. And that includes certainly some of the films that I've watched dealing with this subject matter. I agree with what you said at the outset that, these films are especially unnerving because they deal with, a very grave and real and dark matter. And so for that reason, I think, they're also especially tricky or fraught. I think that with these types of films dealing with the demonic, specifically films that deal with exorcism, there's a certain soberness that's called for, a certain awareness of the sort of gravity and the reality of the subject that you're dealing with that is often lacking from these kinds of films. In fact,
right.
Many of them often veer toward the sort of like B-movie horror type of experience with spitting heads and lots of vomiting and just really sensationalistic images. So the exorcism story becomes a vehicle for, basically a bunch of jump scares and horrific images.
Not to mention the kind of like despairing attitude or sympathy with the devil, or at least fascination with the devil that, a lot of them promote beyond just sheer spectacle.
That's right. And, in the worst examples, you have just sort of outright falsehoods
right.
that are portrayed, regarding the relative power or lack of power of the demons or, how the church functions. And so to that end, the reason why this film might be of interest to our Catholic audience and to viewers more generally is that it, on the whole, avoids those kinds of egregious falsehoods, especially in its handling of, the demons and of the exorcism itself. In fact, there's a lot of care that is taken to, portray the vestments and the sacraments and the mass and some of the prayers and elements of the ritual faithfully. And this
Right.
is something that is kind of a frequent annoyance for Catholic viewers, seeing a priest wearing his stole backwards or something like that. Or
Right.
this film doesn't make any of those mistakes.
Yeah, and it's based on what's the best documented exorcism in American history. Apparently, this exorcism of Emma Schmidt, I believe her name was, in 1928.
Yeah, well, so they make a lot of to do about this in the marketing materials, that, you know, this is based on a true story and that it's you know, very thoroughly researched. And yes, this phrase of the most documented or exhaustively documented exorcism in American history, you know, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I think that what they're pointing to is that this case engendered a lot of media attention at the time. I think there was like a write-up in Time, other sorts of pamphlets written about it, or articles. So at the time, it was kind of a sensationalistic story. And today, unfortunately, I think that this film kind of just does the same song and dance with this material in really kind of portraying it sensationalistically, and focusing on the spectacle. Now,
right. So it's not that the things that happen in the film, in terms of the spectacular demonic occurrences that occur, it's not that they didn't happen, but it's that the film focuses on them.
That would be my take.
The movie is primarily about the ritual. I mean, the title is apt because most of the movie is actually them in the rooms doing the ritual or taking a break from it and dealing with the kind of psychological and spiritual fallout of it. There's not a lot of time spent on what you might call backstory.
Sure. Yeah, and to the film's credit, I think that there are a lot of rich spiritual themes that are present here, specifically regarding the effects that this possession is having on the individual people who are touched by this, you know, exorcism process. So whether that's the priests involved or the religious sisters in whose convent this is taking place, there is a kind of effort at exploring how this is affecting them and how the devil is tempting them through this experience. But also there is a nod to how God himself acts through this kind of experience. So the question of why God would permit this is brought up. And I think, it's convincingly shown that God can permit this kind of evil to occur, this kind of suffering, for the good of others and for the good of the church. Now, to the extent that theme and other spiritual themes are kind of maybe flattened a bit in favor of a more cookie cutter Hollywood approach to this subject, that's where my criticisms come in. So for all of the for all of the to-do about how much we researched this project and how much it's based on a true story, actually, in looking at the source materials just a little bit, it seems that
because they link to them on the movie's website, they link to this book that was written about it and things like that.
Yes, it seems that many of the more interesting edges of this story are sanded down to basically fit into what is expected of this kind of a movie in Hollywood. Right. So I think that it's a little bit of a missed opportunity. For all of the unique elements that are present in it, I'd say that there are just as many, if not more, kind of hackneyed or trite, tropes of these kinds of films. And I think that it's rather telling to just look at the distributor. So the distributor of this film, XYZ Films, they are involved in distributing a lot of kind of B-movie horror type of material, including at least one other film dealing with exorcism, and sort of hitting all of the wrong notes, So the fact that this film would sort of sit comfortably within their portfolio and would appeal to them and to their audience, I think tells you something right off the bat at how successful this film is or is not at charting a different course.
What
But
would be an example of something something interesting in this booklet we took a look at that was written decades ago about this incident that they sort of flattened down and made less interesting?
Sure. Well, one example is a scene in the film where a religious sister brings into the room where the exorcism is taking place some kind of personal object. We see a moment where she considers this thing and then pockets it and takes it in. We're not really told what it is or why it's significant, but then before the exorcism can proceed, the demons sort of make themselves known and say that the chaplet needs to be removed. The chaplet needs to be taken out. So everybody's kind of confused. There's no chaplet here. The priest looks around and the religious sister says, "Oh, yes, I do have a chaplet," and takes it out. This is taken ostensibly from a moment when the young priest who's assisting the exorcism, the real life priest, had brought with him a relic of Saint Therese, the little flower, for personal protection. I guess the exorcism had been going on for several days, and he felt, this would be a good thing to have with him. And this drove the demons into a rage. They could not stand the presence of this relic being in the same room with them.
Yeah.
And I can almost picture the production.
Did he remove it?
I don't know. I think,
because I would also ask, why would you remove the chaplet from the room just because the demon was upset?
Well, but I mean, it might. I don't know. I mean, it might be that you do need to sort of keep things at a certain tenor for the ritual itself to proceed unhindered. And you probably also need to take into account the relative safety of the person in question who's possessed. I'm sure that there are other prudential concerns that could enter into the equation.
But
and
you also pointed out that the sister who was holding the chaplet also had her rosary on her habit. So it's okay, what's the big deal here?
Right, exactly. I mean, the rosary itself is a chaplet, right? So
yeah.
even in what they've done to sort of, what I was saying, Thomas, was that I could picture the production meeting where it's said, our audiences aren't going to know who the little flower is or why this is relevant. We want this to appeal to more than just a Catholic audience. And so let's make this into a chaplet that is driving the demon crazy or something.
Not that non-Catholic audiences even know the word chaplet.
Right. Well, that's the thing, is that I think that this impulse to sort of sand down the real life event to, I don't know, make it less idiosyncratic, actually robs it of some of its richness. So I think it actually would play for a non-Catholic audience. I don't think it would be very difficult to introduce the notion of a relic or of this teenage saint, this holy girl that the demons cannot stand. That is very interesting. And what we're left with is actually something kind of confusing, because as you said, Thomas, it's well, wait, why is this chaplet significant? And what is that she's wearing around her? In fact, all of them are wearing, it's ooh, this doesn't really hold muster.
Yeah, I mean, if Gandalf can say, I'm the servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of honor, and nobody's what? I'm stopping watching this movie now because I didn't understand that. Then surely you can say, this is a relic of Saint Therese, and people will get the general idea.
Now, I mean, I would encourage people to, if they're interested in this, go find that booklet. Again, it's linked to at the film's website. It's a fascinating read, and just scrolling through that for 15 minutes was I would say a much more compelling experience than what is on the whole offered in this film.
Well, one other thing you mentioned when we were talking about this beforehand was the woman in question was actually in her 40s when this particular exorcism taken place. Now, she had been exorcised earlier as a young girl, and this film mentions that too, but she's more I don't know, in her 20s or something in this film. And that also kind of just makes it, I don't know why they make that decision other than that maybe it makes them feel more vulnerable or something, but it's a very typical exorcism subject in movies.
Almost every single one of these movies is a young, sweet girl who then goes demonic, you know?
But more to the point of like the central sort of character themes of the film, the main character played by Dan Stevens is this young priest, and he is kind of a bit uptight about the whole situation and a bit skeptical about whether it's necessary. Not that he doesn't believe in the devil necessarily, but he's kind of uncomfortable with the whole thing. So he's suggesting maybe she should see a doctor. Maybe this is psychological. He gets more and more sort of upset as things start sort of going more and more crazy in his parish. And so there's this dynamic between him and the older priest who is mostly trying to sort of strengthen and convince this younger priest to kind of be on board with this plan, and occasionally getting frustrated with him because he's sort of causing problems spiritually for the exorcism. But in the booklet, it's more interesting because they actually had known each other for years and were good friends, whereas in the film, he just shows up, the friar just shows up, and they have this kind of immediately slightly, I wouldn't go so far as to say adversarial, but kind of like a lack of rapport in their relationship. Whereas in the real life, it wasn't this skeptical, rationalist tending priest. It was this guy who was sort of on board and then was having these kind of essentially spiritual attacks, making him feel kind of apathetic towards his old friend and wanting to get him to leave the parish and all of this stuff. So that's also a little bit more specific, a little more interesting, because we've seen this skeptical younger priest character in other films already.
Exactly. It's another example where the real life account was changed to make it more align with what we've seen in almost every other exorcism film, and so that's why I think that the big knock against this film, despite its successes, is that so many choices are made at cross purposes with the stated intent. And I think it's even visible in the cinematography. So there's this constant handheld camera effect, through the whole film. And frankly...
Yeah, no matter whether it's a scary scene or not, it's just like this super shaky, kind of distracting.
Yeah. And I would say that this is distracting and annoying. And I understand the gesture that's being made there, which is at a kind of, truthfulness, a kind of docudrama. It goes hand in hand with this emphasis on research and this being a true story. And yet, it's sort of blanket deployment across the entirety of the film, I think is not conducive to the end to what it's intending. And it's even, I think, subverted by other elements, notably for me, like the lighting. Now, I'm not a filmmaker, nor am I a cinematographer, so my criticisms in this respect are pretty general, but I think that lighting, for me personally, is one of the key tells of of like a stylistic naturalism or not. And, for all of the shaky cameras, there's still lighting set up here that's not again, it's kind of at a cross purposes with what the film is trying to express. So,
right. Yeah, and it's not just that like it's a bad choice, but I would say the shaky cam is also just not well executed. It doesn't look good. It's too shaky. There's too many weird zooms and stuff. It's aesthetically displeasing. It's not technically well executed.
Right. Yeah, and I hate to be like so negative about something that dozens and dozens of people worked hundreds of hours on. And, I also want to like appreciate what is being done to motivate some of these choices. I think that the film can be commended for, not falling into some of the traps that await those who take up this kind of a subject, and also for depicting, moments like when the older priest rebukes the younger one for his lack of faith, and that this is actually having a negative impact on the efficacy of the deliverance.
Right.
That's a pretty profound thing that might not be obvious to a lot of viewers of these kinds of films.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that because it slides into what I would describe as a more stereotypical kind of portrayal and approach, and that includes in its plotting, by having recourse to these tropes of the young kind of rationalistic priest, or the sexual tension between the pastor and the attractive nun. It's a little disappointing. I don't see any reason why anybody needs to avoid this film, but nor do I see any reason why anybody should be running out there to go watch it.
Yeah, I agree. I would just say that I came away with it. I wouldn't say that I came away from it with knowing anything I didn't already know, or having any sort of like new insights or a new angle on this topic. I will also say it's interesting. Is it just me, or have there been in the past couple of years an increasing number of exorcism movies that are coming out of Hollywood, but sort of more specifically designed to appeal to Catholics? Am I wrong about that? Because they did the Gabrielle Amorth movie. I don't know if that was supposed to appeal to Catholics, but I mean, more things about like real life exorcists and that kind of thing, instead of just sort of totally fabricated scenarios. I don't know.
I don't actually know what film you're referring to.
Well, there's the one with Russell Crowe playing. Okay. It's like the Pope's exorcist or something.
Oh, okay, yeah, I didn't watch that.
He plays the late Father Gabriel Amorth in that film.
Yeah, another one that I didn't watch was Nefarious. I heard.
Yeah, everybody was recommending that one. People didn't recommend the Pope's exorcist. But I didn't see Nefarious because maybe we should have, but I don't enjoy these movies, even if they're good. Like, they're just painful for me to watch. So, but I don't know. I also kind of think that American Catholics are a little too like preoccupied with this topic right now. I mean, I get that, like, yes, there's more occult activity on the rise and stuff like that. That's all true. But it's almost like there's this kind of like magisterium of the exorcists now,
right,
where we're like, instead of like reading the Doctrine of the Church, we're like, this is like what a demon told someone in an exorcism, so it must be true, that kind of thing.
Right.
But so I mean, that's a side note, because that's, that can't be like placed on this film, obviously. But yeah, I come away with it somewhat. I come away from the film somewhat indifferent. I mean, I would praise it for being unambiguously triumphant, but yeah, it's a bit thin. I would say it's a bit thin. There's not a lot there beyond just sort of watching the rite take place, and I don't know why I would ever rewatch the film. I mean, I guess that's one thing I would say about it.
Yeah, and I don't like the notion here or elsewhere in the world of like Catholic approved media that because this thing has a good message, or because it avoids, particularly egregious faults, then it merits support. I think that, I want to judge this film on its own merits,
right.
and just sort of as a film. I think that it's not. I think it's a missed opportunity in many respects.
That's it for this review. And again, the movie, if you do want to see it, will be in theaters on June 6th. So thanks everybody for listening. We'll be with you next time with an episode on Alfred Hitchcock's classic film I Confess, which is timely right now because of the new law in Washington State requiring priests to break the seal of confession. So that'll be an interesting sort of topical thing to discuss. All right, James, thanks, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yep, thanks, Thomas.
Criteria is a production of CatholicCulture.org. Check out our other podcasts, including Way of the Fathers, an early church history podcast hosted by Jim Papandrea, Catholic Culture audiobooks bringing to life classic Catholic writings, and the Catholic Culture Podcast, an interview show exploring Catholic arts, culture, and issues. You'll find all of this, as well as Catholic news, commentary, liturgical resources, and much more at CatholicCulture.org.